Hello and welcome everybody to today's video. I know we've been gone for quite a while. Felt like we kind of just disappeared and went off camera. Truth behold, we had to take a pause, take a step back and basically review something that was quite major in our lives that has essentially been going on for the past 6 months. And hopefully in this video I'm going to be able to share with you what that is. Take a seat, grab a snack and let's get on with it. So, January of 2025, start of a brand new year, but this was also the year that our fixed mortgage rate was going to be ending before we'd be going on to a variable rate mortgage essentially in October. We didn't really know how much this was going to cost, so we decided that we were going to go and see essentially a mortgage advisor. So we went, saw a mortgage advisor, they tallied up the costings of a remortgage as well as a variable rate, and the numbers that they were coming out with were quite a lot more than what we were paying now, which were quite significant, and we didn't really know what we were going to do. So then the mortgage advisor said, have you ever actually considered selling your house? Although the housing market at the moment was quite quiet and there wasn't really a lot of houses for sale, he said that we'd benefit quite well from that because our house would be classed as a highly anticipated property, obviously with it being well looked after, recently renovated, really good location, big driveway, that kind of stuff. He said a highly anticipated property tends to sell better, but because there wasn't as many houses on the market, our house would stand out, I guess, more on top of a house that probably wasn't as highly anticipated as ours. So yeah, he basically said that now was quite a good time to sell if we were going to sell. So myself and Kelly went home, we had to think about it, and to be honest, that was the only real option in terms of what was fundamentally suitable for us. The prices for the variable rate and for a remortgage were just outrageous. It seems silly having to stay where we are all because the economy's gone to pot and we have to then pay more because the mortgage rates have all gone up in the air, you know what I mean? So yeah, we then decided that we were going to sell our house, and that was a decision that we made. So the next week we decided to get in a couple of different valuers to value the house and see what they thought would be best to put it on for on the market. So I think we had 5 different valuers come out. They all gave us different marketing strategies, advertising strategies, as well as different guide prices and what they thought would be a good kind of starting and finishing point in order to sell the house. So we decided to go with a particular valuer. They gave us the highest guide price, but would have then been one of the cheapest in terms of the funds and stuff, in terms of how much we'd have to pay. So that was really good as well. And then 1 week later, we put our house on the market for the guide price that we were happy with the company that we thought was the best, and a marketing strategy which we thought would sell pretty quick. So it didn't take long before we got our first viewing. This was a first-time buyer. They came round, they showed quite a bit of interest in the property. However, the day after, when they were followed up, they weren't a huge fan of it because it was a bit too small. Then the second person that viewed our house, they were a downsizer. They again showed an interest in the house, but then said that the kitchen was too small. Okay, fair enough. The third viewer was a cash buyer. They showed quite a bit of interest. They were asking quite a lot of questions. Then they said the garage and garden was too small. Fair enough. Viewing number 4, they came round and they didn't really show much interest, nor did they provide any feedback, just said the house wasn't for them. Viewing number 5, they came and viewed it, showed quite a lot of interest, and then when they were followed up, just completely blanked the estate agent, which was rather rude, but whatever. And like after the 5th viewing, we were just getting a bit kind of stressed out. We thought this had gone on for like 2 to 3 weeks and we weren't really getting anywhere. A little bit worried that it wasn't going to sell. We even reached out to the estate agents and said, is there anything that you think we can do in order to increase the interest? The one thing that we didn't want them to say, which was lower the value, and then we thought we're going to give it probably another month or so just to see what happens and go from there. So the 6th viewing, this happened a couple of days after we received the email back, and this actually seemed a bit different. They showed quite a lot of interest, they were asking some really good questions, and they kept kind of speaking as if they could see themselves in the house, and that's what I liked. It wasn't just kind of the obvious stuff like when was this built, when was that built, how old is this, is that insulated, like the questions which are kind of obvious. This was not really questions, they were just statements where they could see themselves in the house. Do you know what I mean? And it seemed kind of really nice. It just seemed really promising. And then literally the day after we also had another viewing, and that didn't really go anywhere. They showed interest, but again didn't really provide any feedback to the estate agents. And then again, it was like after the 7th one we was like, right, this is just getting a bit silly, like what do we do? But there's that famous saying, good things always come to those that wait. So we waited, and just like that saying, our silver lining then came. The day after the 7th viewing, we got a phone call from some of the estate agents, and it was saying that the people that viewed it the 6th time wanted to put an offer in. So they put an offer in. It was more towards the lower end of our guide price, so we counter-offered, and that was then accepted. So we had, in theory, sold our house. However, the next stage was finding a house that we wanted. So when it came to viewing houses, we looked at a total of 8 properties in total. 6 of those we viewed during the selling phase of our house. So we came up with a checklist, which helped us kind of work out what houses were right for us and others that we could just disregard. And this checklist included things like the location and where the house was kind of based in proximity to where we currently live. Another one was the budget and the kind of price range and making sure it fell within the price range of what we could afford, but then working out what needed to be done and making sure that we had enough for that. It also included the fact that it needed to be a south-facing garden and hopefully a bigger garden compared to what we've got at the moment. And then there was 2 other aspects. The first one was extra rooms, so things like a downstairs toilet, a garage, a utility room, and then the last one, which was quite an important one to me, and it was the working and age of the bathroom and the kitchen. I've always kind of thought that bathrooms and kitchens are like the most expensive projects if you need to do them brand new in a house, so that was an element that we had to factor in as well. Before our house had sold, myself and Kaylee were being quite picky in terms of what it was we wanted, obviously in relation to the aspects that we've just mentioned. But what made it harder is that what Kaylee was looking for was different to what I was looking for. So we kind of had to find this perfect balance and work it out that way. But obviously now that we've sold our house, it was important not to be too picky, and if anything, just finding the perfect house and quickly. So at this point we had managed to whittle it down to 2 properties, both with similarities and others with differences. So the similarities, they both had downstairs toilets and they were both a very similar size, yet they were both miles away from each other and they were in different kind of price brackets, so that was obviously things that we had to consider. So knowing this, we went to view both houses again. So I went to view the first property, and the first time we viewed this specific house was in the dark, so we only really saw the inside. We didn't really see, we saw the garden, but it wasn't anything too advanced. It was all obviously in the dark. We had to use our phone torches to look around, and we really liked the house. However, viewing it a second time, we saw a lot of things that we would consider as elements that could lead to long-term problems, like the roof was an issue, the patio, the interior walls, the kitchen. There was a lot of, although the kitchen was quite new, there were just still things that were quite problematic with it, and it really put us off, and we knew that these would cost an absolutely fortune to fix kind of later on once we'd bought the property. So this kind of made us rule this one out, which was a little annoying because this was the first one, literally one of the first houses that we saw that we had our heart set on, and it had just gone like that because of a couple of things that we didn't see the first time. But then we went to view the second house, as this was really the only option, and it was a little different. So we arrived, there was a lot of cars there, and the door was wide open, so we thought, what's going on? We thought this was a private viewing. We went inside just to find out that it was an open house, which is where many different buyers can go into the property and view it at the same time. That way they can squeeze in more people in obviously a short space of time. So we went in like they all did and viewed the house again, but in a bit more detail than we did the first time. And compared to the first house, there was just a clear winner, and that was this one. And we knew that we had to kind of push to get this house. So after we viewed it, we went to speak to the estate agent and asked him if there was any other information that we needed to know about the house, any kind of crucial problems there might be, and there was no issues as far as he was aware. However, he said something next which not really upset us, but was more of like a kick in the teeth, and He said that we're going to have to be quick because the buyer wants to sell the property tomorrow, but they had also already had 3 people put offers in. So we were slightly like, damn, okay, that makes things a little harder. So we went home that night and kind of thought, what we're going to do. So we put an offer in. Went to bed. Not that we slept much because we were panicking, thinking if we offered the right amount, is it the right house? We kind of rushed it a little bit, but we reviewed it a second time, so we knew this was the one. And yeah, went to bed, and that was it. It was now a waiting game until tomorrow. So the following day, me and George went on a trip to B&M just to get a few little bits from town, and my phone began to ring. When I checked, it was the estate agent. So I thought, this is the time. Are we going to get the news that we wanted to hear, that the house was ours, or the dreaded bad news that we'd lost the house and it had gone to somebody else that had potentially put a bigger offer in than us? So I answered the call, and the conversation went a little bit like this. Hello, is that Adam? I replied. Just wanted to get in touch regarding your offer that you put in on one of our properties. Okay, this was perfect. I replied again. Well, we are pleased to say that the buyer has accepted your offer and is happy to proceed. Like, perfect. This was it. We had now got the house, we were over the moon, and that was it. We had now found a house we wanted and also sold ours. However, next was all the important legal stuff. Once all the correct people and all the parties involved were notified of our outcome, it was now time to start the longest part of our process. All the legal bits, all the paperwork, and that's exactly what we did. So our chain was only 3 properties long, or 3 properties big, including ourselves. We had some first-time buyers, you had ourselves, and you had the house that we were buying. And we thought that this process would be really straightforward and really quick. However, that was not the case. First things first, we had to carry out some identification checks, as well as fill out some surveys online. These were done via a really confusing mobile app, and they included things about us personally, about the house that we were selling, as well as the house that we were buying. This was then translated into physical paperwork that was done by our solicitors, and this is where our first delay happened. So it went on for about 4 weeks, and we just kind of wondered why we had received no update. When we voiced our concerns, we then found out that the paper had been misplaced or just kind of sat there laying on someone's desk, and it hadn't been picked up. So because of that, we were then 4 weeks over schedule, and yeah, we were a little bit annoyed about that. But then eventually the paperwork was all sorted out. Now that all the paperwork had been completed, or the initial paperwork anyway, it was time that myself and Kaylee did a home buyers survey. This was to basically just make sure there was nothing wrong with the house, and just to make sure that what we were buying is what we'd already expected. Luckily, we had the home buyers report. That went pretty quick, probably happened over about 1 to 2 weeks. Came back, and there were a couple of things that were marked in red and listed as major, but it was nothing too scary. We had already found out what these things were when we looked around the property, and it was all stuff that we was already aware of and had already taken into consideration. So although there were a few things that were problematic, we'd already factored those into timescales and budgeting, that kind of stuff. Moving on to searches, this is essentially where the surveyors have a look at the property, the surrounding area, and just make sure that there's nothing hugely problematic, whether it's structural issues, whether there's a mine shaft underneath your house, whether you're in a flood zone, that kind of stuff. This bit also went pretty quick and nothing major was identified, so that was also really good. However, then it was time for the inquiries. So there were some of the searches that were done that needed inquiries to be raised in order for them to pass legal regulations and just to make sure that everything is as it should be. And this is where our next delay happened. We basically just received the same update over and over again, saying, oh, we're waiting for your solicitors to raise inquiries, we're waiting for your solicitors to raise inquiries, and then again, waiting for your solicitors to raise inquiries. This went on for a good 4 to 5 weeks, and again, we were getting nowhere with it. Ourselves, our buyers, our sellers, everyone that was involved in our chain were just getting sick of it. We eventually just voiced our concerns in several emails, kept on saying we want to move quickly, as a matter of urgency, can you please get this sorted? And eventually the searches, the inquiries were all sorted out, and there was nothing too scary found, which was perfect. So yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. And now we're on to the final hurdle, which essentially was signing the contracts and getting them exchanged. Not long after, we got our first contract through, This was the contract for the sale of our house, and we quickly got this signed. We had a witness to watch us sign it and made sure that all the information was correct. Once that was done, we sent it directly to the solicitors, essentially by taking it to their office. We drove and delivered it. We chose to do this rather than post it, mainly because I didn't want it to go missing, and we thought delivering it was a bit more direct and a bit quicker. It's also important to highlight here that we also had an electrical test being done at the same time on the house that we was buying, which prevented us, in effect, from signing the contract for the buying of the house. However, a couple of weeks later this came back and it was perfect. There was no issues found on the house, and because of that it meant that we was able to sign the contract for the buying of the property. So again, we had a witness watch us sign it, we took it back and delivered it to the solicitors, and that was that. The final hurdle was essentially completed. All that we now had to wait for was for all parties to be happy to proceed, to complete, and essentially come up with a completion and exchange date. So we had a few emails back and forth. Eventually, we agreed on an initial date on the 23rd of May. Now, this would have been absolutely perfect because it was a bank holiday. Myself and Kaylee had the time off work, and it just seemed a perfect day. However, it didn't go ahead because our buyers weren't able to get their deposit sorted out from their Help to Buy scheme, which meant we had to then delay it, which today, being the 2nd of June, we are hoping that we're moving in at the end of this week, which is the 6th of June. So this will be the final update in this video, guys. So you're going to find out if we've moved or not, but essentially that's been our process from start to finish. We're hoping that it all goes ahead. There shouldn't be anything else preventing us from going ahead. And yeah, guys, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in our brand new house. Bye-bye.